You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Hey, everybody, don't get down just because it's Monday, because you've just tuned in to The Bible Guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, you are so encouraging, Chris.
Well,
that's why I listen.
I try to be anti-Monday, anti-blues, and so today we are going to pep you up with a brand new, well, it's not a brand new segment.
Anti-Monday, anti-blues?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you'd be pro-Monday, anti-blues.
Well, anti-Monday blues.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, because I like waking up on a Monday.
Well, you know, every day above the ground is a good
not
day.
having a Monday, the alternative isn't great.
Right. Then that means you're done with life.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Mondays are coming.
I'm pro-days, anti-negativity.
Yeah,
there you go.
anti-Monday blues.
Monday blues, yeah.
So we've only done this segment maybe once or twice, probably, right?
I don't ever remember doing it. Have we done it before?
Yeah, we've done. Here's the reason why I remember. This is called Finish the Lyric.
Oh, yeah, I remember doing it.
Because I remember saying I'm not good with song lyrics at all. In fact, I'm very nervous about this segment.
Well, you should be. You should be, Chris.
I read it just a few minutes ago, and I said to Jeff, I'm not going to know these. And he said, these are really popular songs. You'll know them.
This is your arch nemesis right here. This is it.
But listen, hey, it actually says Jeff will start singing a song, comma. Yeah. Then we'll see if Chris can finish the next lyric. So it didn't even say I have to sing it. It says you have to sing it.
Finish it.
If he can't, he gets a silly penalty, which, by the way, that's new. Right?
Yeah.
Like making an animal noise for 10 seconds.
Okay. That's a lot of work.
Are you going to give me silly penalties?
I don't know. I know I'm not singing it. Because I don't know a couple of the tunes. I kind of know the songs.
Okay.
But I don't know a couple of the tunes. So.
But silly penalties could be fun.
Okay.
But,
I'll think of them.
It's up to you.
All right. Like stand on your head and...
Well, that's a choice on an audio podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I could do for all the listeners? I could just grunt like I'm doing it, and they would never know. One finger, push up with one finger.
There you go. That's right.
There we go.
Here we go. Are you ready?
Yeah, I guess so.
So I think you're going to know these. Okay. So while I don't know the tunes to several of these songs,
you're just saying that.
I know the...
You do know the tunes.
I know
you know
about them.
You know how I know?
Huh?
Because you said immediately you'll recognize all these songs.
Well, I think you will.
Which means you know them.
Well, as I looked through who the singers were, you're going to know who they are.
Okay.
You're going to know these songs.
All right. I'm ready. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, ready?
Yep.
Imagine all the people
John
living
Lennon.
life in...
Imagine all the people... What? Living what?
Living life in...
Living life in peace.
There you go.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
All right, good.
Okay.
I was actually unsure of that, believe it or not.
Okay, so I kind of knew that tune.
Okay.
Yeah. This next one,
Yep.
I know the song.
Yep.
I do not know the tunes
Okay.
to this segment.
Okay, give it to me.
Because this is Thriller Night, and no one's going to save you from...
Oh, yeah. First of all, that's really high. Because this is Thriller Night, and no one's gonna save you from the beast about to strike. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's
So,
it.
believe it or not, I never really listened to Michael Jackson.
Oh, really?
At all, yeah.
Yeah, 1980s, baby.
Okay.
I had the Thriller jacket. Remember I talked about that in Christmas?
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Still like that old-time rock and roll, that kind of music.
So I actually sang this with my buddy Jeff Miller at one of those things where you could record like a karaoke thing. Back before karaoke was a thing.
Where you can make a recording.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So I have this tape at home. Just like that old time of rock and roll. That kind of music just soothes my soul.
Soothes the soul.
Oh, it's the soul.
Yeah,
Dang it. I would have missed it.
That's okay.
You know that show
who is
that says finish the lyrics? I would have missed it. I would
you would have missed it.
Is it Bob Seger?
Yeah, Bob Seger.
Yep.
He's a Detroit boy.
Yeah, that's right. He
Yeah.
is. Yep.
Okay, so here's another
Dang
one.
it,
I don't know the tune. I don't know the tune to this one.
I'm mad.
Papa Don't Preach.
Yeah,
I'm in
Madonna.
trouble deep.
That's Madonna.
Papa Don't Preach.
I've been losing sleep.
Yep, there you go.
Papa don't preach. I'm in trouble deep. Papa don't preach. I've been losing sleep. And I made up my mind. Oh, I'm keeping my baby. Right?
Oh, jeez.
That's what that's
terrible.
what the song's about.
Yeah.
It's don't yell at me because, we did an oopsie.
Yep. Okay, here we go. So I know this one. Just a small town girl living in a lonely world.
Seriously? Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere.
There you go. You got it.
What's the next line?
I don't know.
Yes, you do.
I don't.
Just the city boy.
Oh, city boy. Yep. Born and raised in South Detroit.
Sing it.
I don't know.
South Detroit.
Yeah. So did you know there is no South Detroit?
Well, the southern part of Detroit, Jeff, is the South Detroit.
No. So from where he was, when he was writing that song in the city, he was looking out his hotel window.
Yeah.
He was looking into Canada because the river cuts straight below the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
And so when you look straight south from the downtown portion of Detroit, you're looking into Canada. So when he was writing it, he wasn't thinking about Detroit. He was thinking about Canada. He just didn't know it.
Really?
Yeah, that's a fact.
Well, my guess is if you're on the southern part of Detroit, like on the walk, you're in South Detroit.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Well, it's not official.
Yeah.
But it is technically according to the lawyer in your head.
No, you can
only say
look at it. Look at it on a map. If you look at it on a map, and then he acknowledged it later. He acknowledged it later that
you would never say
there is no South Detroit.
If Bonnie, well, legally, but if Bonnie called you and said, "What part of Detroit are you in?" you would never say the southern part of Detroit.
No.
Liar.
I promise you.
Lies.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't. This guy just called me a liar. Here, you want to know what made Jeff mad this week?
Hey,
that's it right there.
Chris called you a liar. I didn't even say no, you wouldn't. I just said liar.
That's right. Well, lying is not a good thing, and that would force us into some kind of reform if we wanted to change, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Speaking of reforms,
that is a horrific transition. Horrific. Congratulations.
Yes, that might be the worst one.
That'll be the worst.
That might be the worst one.
Hey, lying is bad, and if you lied, you need reform. You know who else needed reform? Hezekiah.
Well, Hezekiah led religious reforms in Israel.
That's so funny.
Oh,
dude.
that's terrible.
Yes, that's really funny.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up this chunk of Hezekiah's story. It's lasted for a few chapters here, where after his dad was such a bad king and had nailed the doors shut on the temple and filled it with just a bunch of junk, and it took him weeks and weeks and weeks to clean it out and rededicate it. Then they had a big party and a celebration, recommitting themselves to God and all those things.
Yeah, in fact, he actually filled the temple with a brand new altar and moved the other altar, remember?
Yeah.
And he actually took pagan practices from the Assyrians.
Talking about Ahaz, his dad.
Oh, yes. The Assyrians who took them over in captivity, who defeated them. And then and he was sort of submitting, maybe trying to buy favor with the Assyrians, or maybe he actually really... maybe he just was so wicked he admired the Syrian false gods. Who knows?
I think sometimes I've been thinking about that a little bit over the last couple of days, because we read about that a few weeks last week or whatever, 2 weeks ago, about Ahaz getting rid of God and the worship of God, nailing the temple doors shut, and then worshiping the gods of the people who conquered him.
Right.
They defeated him. And I wonder, sometimes people get mad at God because things didn't turn out the way they wanted it to turn out, and then they blame God instead of his wickedness, or instead of the fact that his army just didn't have the skill set or whatever, he wasn't prepared, or he was a bad leader. It couldn't possibly be his fault. It has to be God's fault. Get rid of God. I'm going to go because their gods helped them win. My God didn't help me win. I'm going to blame God for my situation. Right. I think that if that's what happened, that's an extremely common idea. Right. That happens in all of our lives. So I wonder if that's what happened in Ahaz. Whatever it was, he got bitter about God and nailed the door shut and forbade the worship of the one true God. A lot of good this God did us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As opposed to acknowledging, God, I haven't been following you, and I believe that you're trying to correct me. Instead, it was, I hate you. But Hezekiah decided to turn back to the God of his grandfather, even though his father had turned away. And then he begins leading the people. And they had this big celebration. What was his grandfather's name? Uzziah? What is it? I think it was Uzziah. Yeah, Jotham. Oh, so it was Hezekiah, close. Ahaz, Jotham, Uzziah. Oh. Yeah. Wait, Jotham, Uzziah. Yes. Yeah, Uzziah, then Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Oh, his great-grandfather was Uzziah. Yeah. Okay. So Hezekiah... leads them in this big party at the temple, and people are happy. Then he goes and invites even northern Israel to come and celebrate the Passover.
Yeah.
And they go through that. And the Passover was a deeply religious experience. And they lingered for a while on the Passover celebration, that kind of stuff. But then it didn't go just to, a religious event with with rededicating the temple, and then a religious ceremony in the Passover. But he begins to bring real deep day-to-day living type reforms, right? So he wasn't just adopting a new religion. He was saying, we're going to let this change our lives. Right. And that's kind of what you see in this next piece. And that's why I think the Bible takes 3 or 4 chapters to kind of unveil how deep these reforms went in the lives of Israel because of Hezekiah.
Think about for an entire generation I don't know how long Ahaz was king. I think we read like 18 years or something?
Yeah, Ahaz was king for 16 years.
16 years?
Yep.
So that is an unbelievable amount of time for you to be, it almost is an entire generation of pagan practices. Yeah. So it would seem like, any religious practice that's, it would be so foreign, right?
Right.
You can grow up and become, college age and never have known a single person in your family to have, honored God in any way.
Right. So here we are in 2 Chronicles chapter 31, and it says, when the festival ended, talking about that big Passover, and remember they decided to have a second week of it?
Right.
Right? They liked it so much, they kept going.
Yeah.
So when the festival ended, the Israelites who attended went to all the towns of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh, and they smashed all the sacred pillars, cut down the Asherah poles, and removed the pagan shrines and altars. After this, the Israelites returned to their own towns and homes. Hezekiah then organized the priests and Levites into divisions to offer the burnt offerings and peace offerings and to worship and to give thanks and praise to the Lord at the gates of the temple. The king also made a personal contribution of animals for the daily and morning and evening burnt offerings, the weekly Sabbath festivals, the monthly new moon festivals, and the annual festivals as prescribed in the law of the Lord. In addition, he required the people in Jerusalem to bring a portion of their goods to the priests and Levites so they could devote themselves fully to the law of the Lord. When the people of Israel heard these requirements, they responded generously by bringing the first share of their grain, new wine, olive oil, honey, and all the produce of their fields. They brought a large quantity, a tithe of all that they produced. The people who had moved to Judah from Israel and the people of Judah themselves brought in the tithes of their cattle and sheep and goats and a tithe of the things that had been dedicated to the Lord their God, and they piled them up in great heaps. They began piling them up in late spring, and the heaps continued to grow until early autumn. When Hezekiah and his officials came and saw these huge piles, they thanked the Lord and his people Israel. Where did all this come from? Hezekiah asked the priests and Levites. And Azariah, the high priest from the family of Zadok, replied, since the people began bringing their gifts to the Lord's temple, we have had enough to eat and plenty to spare. The Lord has blessed his people, and all this is left over. Hezekiah ordered that storerooms be prepared in the temple of the Lord, and when this was done, the people faithfully brought all the tithes and gifts to the temple. Conaniah, the Levite, was put in charge, assisted by his brother Shimei. Supervisors under them were Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ishmachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah. These appointments were made by King Hezekiah and Azariah, the chief official in the temple of God. Man, those names sound so foreign, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Korah, son of Imnah, the Levite, who was the gatekeeper at the east gate, was put in charge of distributing the voluntary offerings given to God, the gifts and the things that had been dedicated to the Lord. And his faithful assistants were Edom and Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah. They distributed the gifts among the families of priests in their towns by their divisions, dividing the gifts fairly among old and young alike. They distributed gifts to all males 3 years old or older, regardless of their place in the genealogical records. The distribution went to all who would come to the Lord's temple to perform their daily duties according to their divisions. They distributed gifts to the priests who were listed by their families in the genealogical records, and to the Levites 20 years old or older who were listed according to their jobs and their divisions. Food allotments were also given to the families of all those listed in the genealogical records, including their little babies, wives, sons, and daughters, for they had all been faithful in purifying themselves. As for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who were living in the open villages around the towns, men were appointed by name to distribute portions to every male among the priests and to all the Levites listed in the genealogical records. Okay, That's a lot to say. They spread all the stuff around.
Right.
In this way, King Hezekiah handled the distribution throughout all Judah, doing what was pleasing and good in the sight of the Lord his God. In all that he did in the service of the temple of God and in his efforts to follow God's laws and commands, Hezekiah sought his God wholeheartedly. As a result, he was very successful.
Great way to end that chapter.
What a great way, right?
Yeah, and so first of all, holy cow on all those names. Second of all, I can't believe I didn't turn my head. I coughed directly into the microphone. That was probably so loud for people. Sorry about that. I apologize. Third of all,
and here's your lung back.
Right, yeah, here's my lung, yeah. And I've had 23 days I've been coughing.
23 days.
23 days, it's terrible. And then thirdly, just wanted to make a general comment about Hezekiah. So Hezekiah is, again, just continuing to do what is right. And I love how he is inviting the tribes, Judah, Benjamin, we understand that, but then Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Yeah. So those are the northern tribes, right? Because Judah and Benjamin were the only southern tribes, right?
That's right.
And so these other two tribes were from the north. And so he's inviting everybody. And then he finally accomplishes what nobody else was able to fully accomplish. He cut down all the Asherah poles and removed the pagan shrines and altars. And he did this in it says after this, the Israelites returned to the towns and homes. Yeah. So he was able to finally get rid of everything, because it seems like every other king who was good went like most of the way, like the really good kings, but they didn't quite. Even the scripture said they decided not to remove the false temples or the false shrines, or where did they set up the northern place of worship? Was it in Samaria?
Yeah.
Right?
Samaria.
Yeah, like they refused to get rid of those,
Right.
But Hezekiah, man, he's not in the north, but he's in the south, man. He's taking care of business.
But they went over, and I think the big thing is this: kings can only do so much. It has to be the will of the people. And what you had is, it was the Israelites who went to all the towns, right? And they did it. So he led, and he led well, and it was clear that his worship was authentic, that his commitment to following the Lord was true and real. The people could see what had happened in Israel at the time. And then also, remember, most of the people in Israel were hauled away, because it's only the leftover people in northern Israel that are there. In Judah and in Benjamin, that community was thriving under Hezekiah. But in the north, they had all been mostly captured, and they were off in exile. So it's just a few remnants, leftovers, that were up there. So it's a little easier, perhaps, for them to go around and just decide they're going to wipe everything out, all of these worship centers, because there was nobody really to fight back against them.
Right.
But they went up there and they did it, and the people got behind it. And you're right, it's the first time, since Solomon, at least, that this place had been cleaned up. Right, they got rid of it. So that's really amazing. And
I love how it talks about. So everybody started bringing their tithes, right?
Yeah.
So verse number 6.
He led. He brought his gifts first.
Yeah, that's right. He led by example.
Yep. He
as the leader, it said he brought his own personal offerings and contributions. And it says then the people who had moved from Judah, from Israel, the people of Judah themselves brought their tithes of their cattle, sheep, and goats, and the tithes of the things that they had been dedicated to the Lord their God, and they piled them up in great heaps. And then they piled them up in great heaps to such a degree that Hezekiah says, where's all this surplus coming from?
Yeah, right.
And they said, well, when people obey, go figure, when people obey, there's plenty to go around. There's more than enough to eat. There's more than enough to sacrifice. There's more than enough in the temple, And by the way, that is an unbelievable thing. Hey, let me tell you a quick story. I was in between, before I came to Michigan, I attended Andy Stanley's church, and I went to Buckhead Church one time, and I saw Andy there, and he was doing a building campaign because he was about to build a couple buildings, right? And he told the story about Zerubbabel. And he talked about how Zerubbabel marched back all of the, and I think we're going to get to it, right? Yeah. He marched back all the riches, right? And he says, there's billions of dollars, right? And he basically showed up at the doorstep, and he's like, hey, my ancestors took all this money from you, so I feel obligated to pay it back. And he paid it back. And then And I remember it was a campaign kind of a thing, right? But more than the campaign, it was really about an obedience to tithe, right? So he was talking about, like, as a church leader, and this is where you sort of have to bear with me, okay? Because he did it so cleverly. He said, as a church leader, he said, I certainly would like somebody to show up on the door and say, here's $1 billion for the church. Right. Do some great things with it, right? Now, knowing where we are as a church, we're out of room in their building, right? Yeah. We need a couple $1 million to expand, just to add a couple hundred seats, right? And we'd love to launch even a new campus on top of
a couple new campuses,
right? Yeah. Like, wouldn't you love it?
Oh yeah.
If somebody came up and just give us $1 billion and said, hey, here it is. And so, as a church leader, that's a really cool story. And so I remember sitting in the audience, and I remember thinking, that is hilarious, right? Just the story. And then he goes, then it dawned on me. He said, we actually have the potential to do exactly that. And he goes, God just spoke to me and said, and the way that he said it was, God spoke to me and said, you do have access to those resources. And he goes, where? And he says, it's in the lives of your people. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so if everybody tithed, if everybody decided to work toward a tithe, if everybody decided to go toward, and we just talked about this a couple weeks ago in our services, if everybody decided, what was the graphic that you showed? The graph showed that if everybody who didn't give decided to give just 2%, not 10%, just 2%, we would have...
It'd be 167% increase in our giving.
167% increase.
Yeah.
Which means we would have sky's the limit on building things, starting things, the kingdom of God spreading, there being another church available in new neighborhoods, right? And all the things that we feel like God has called us to, we're being held back. And it's really being led by Hezekiah. And then we see the obedience of the people. And the obedience of the people says that they decide to do it. And then all of a sudden Hezekiah says, where's all this surplus coming from?
Right.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. It really is one of these stories where...
The full tithe, if the whole church, if our whole church tithe, based on an estimate of the average household incomes within like 6 miles or 5 miles
studies,
of our
numbers,
church.
all that.
We did a bunch of research on that. If the average... if everybody in the church tithed, we would have like a 457% increase in our income. And I think about that because
that's hilarious.
It's not about how much money we need. It's not like Hezekiah was like, "Oh no, how are we going to fund this?"
Right.
Hezekiah decided, without the people, he was going to step up and do what he could to. He provided all of the animals for the function of the temple. He decided not only for this week, for the daily morning burnt offerings, the daily evening burnt offerings, the weekly Sabbath festivals, the monthly new moon festivals, and the annual festivals. So basically, he's like, listen, I'm going to fully resource everything the temple needs to be able to do the functions of the temple.
Right.
But what was happening was, the Levites and the priests, they were never given any land. Remember? So they were a tribe without land. They were there to serve all the rest of the people. And so they weren't being funded. And so do you remember all that, the word about the priests that they just weren't dedicated yet to the Lord?
Yeah, right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
You know why?
Yeah, 'cause
they were having to hustle doing other work, right? That they weren't doing the work of the temple. The temple doors were shut. So they were out working in factories and running bakeries and doing all the things, that you had to do.
Plowing the fields.
They weren't prepared yet. And so that's why it took so long for all the priests to be able to come back and to get ready. So then the idea behind those tithes was that it would take care of the temple, it would take care of the poor, and it would take care of the Levites. And it turned out when the people did what they were supposed to do with their tithe, there was plenty in every area. Right. And then we know this is true. The kings would then set up benevolence essentially through the temple to be able to take care of the poor in the community as well. And so all these things honored God. So it's never been about what can the church, it shouldn't be, what can the church get from people. It's when the people are honoring God. The Bible says Hezekiah sought his God wholeheartedly,
Right.
and as a result, he was very successful.
Right.
So when all of the people in the church are seeking God wholeheartedly, they will be successful, very successful.
Yeah.
Right. And when they are successful, when they are blessed, there will be plenty.
Right.
For the church. And that's how it works. So it's not what can the church get, it's what God's offering to do for his people if the people would just honor God.
It's how God structured and designed the church, which, by the way, I've always said this, and I know we're just about our time, but I've always said this. I love how God designed the church specifically in this way, because, for instance, I get paid last Friday, right? And so for me, like, giving and generosity is an individual practice. It's an individual practice, and I say individual, but it's really an individual family, right? So my wife, my daughters, my kids, all that, my son. So my wife and I, it's an individual family faith component. And so I love that piece of it. And so each person has to wrestle with that. And then together, it's also a sort of a corporate family together missional thing. So we as the family of God, are designed, it's God's plan. It is ridiculous as what you just said is. It sounds ridiculous. A 457% increase. That's actually God's design.
That's his plan.
That's his design. That's his plan.
He wants to transform the community through his local churches.
Yes.
But his local churches don't have the resources because his local Christians aren't following him.
That's right.
And then
That's right.
they're missing out on his blessing because of it.
Right. Yeah, so that's why I love how God designed the church. It's like, it's brilliant. It's an individual thing, and at the same time, it's a community thing. It's a corporate thing. And it's like, man, that is just so unbelievable. So every time that we talk about generosity, we have to understand that, like, God is waiting to bless you individually, because that's what it means to trust God.
Yep.
I saw a TikTok meme the other day, literally I think it was last night or 2 nights ago, where there was like this old conservative-looking preacher with a suit, and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to say something, that I don't like or something. Man, it was a great statement. He said something about a tithe, and he said something about, I just remember the ending statement. He goes, something about like, oh, I know what it was. He said, can I promise you that you'll get rich if you tithe? He said, I can't promise you that. He goes, but I can promise you this. He goes, I can promise you that God could do more with the 9/10 and God as your partner than he can you living on 10/10 by yourself.
That's the truth.
And I thought, man, what a great statement.
Yeah.
Because that's the promise of God.
And then for me and you to talk about this, for some listener who doesn't know us, the reality is before the people began tithing, Hezekiah was tithing, right?
That's right.
And that's the same in my life. I know it's true in your life. My wife and I give substantially more than a tithe back to the church, right? I have other jobs besides Heritage Church, but complete everything Heritage Church gives me, everything I make from my other jobs, I give more than 10% back. And all I can say is God blesses us in extravagant ways. And I just wish everybody could experience what we're experiencing as we choose to obey God. So we're not saying do something that we don't do.
Right.
We're saying we do it. We see the blessing of it. You should do it too. And it's a lot of fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our time. And so hopefully we'll see you next time on the Bible Guys.